All right, everybody, welcome back to Hook. This week, we're going to address a lot of the questions that Travis gets in the storefront and that just we see online a lot about how do you choose the best kayak for you? And if you're a beginner, how do you go through all the analysis and not be paralyzed by the analysis and never pull the trigger? So, we're going to jump right into it. Hey, Travis, how's it going?
It's going well. I kind of look forward to doing this one. We get a lot of people just not sure kind of what direction, and your paralysis via analysis is a very good example or good way to say it, because you can YouTube, you can get online and just get overwhelmed.
Yep. I've been experiencing that lately too, because um, I if you anyone has been watching these podcasts over time, I have been very much kind of old school about like drives and not necessarily motors and forward facing sonar. And now I'm finally trying to up my game a little bit and maybe even do some competitions this year, because mostly because my oldest son wants to do them, so he's going to drag me along for the ride. But I've been researching even things like, does the Minn Kota power drive map to a Humminbird Explore 9? Because how cool would it be to power that, Minn Kota power drive using your Humminbird? But I've spent probably 8 hours trying to just research and figure it out and still haven't come up with an idea, and just got so frazzled and my brain started to hurt. And I can't even imagine, now that I'm 3 years into the kayak game, like if you're a beginner walking into the shop and you see 40 different kayaks that all look absolutely awesome, how you would come to make a decision. And I know that you deal with that a lot, and that's primarily what you like to help people with when they come into the shop.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing that happens is people get online and they get their mind made up
Yep.
by watching this guy or that guy, and a lot of times those guys are paid or they're getting that kayak for free, and so they're going to say it's the best kayak out there. When I've had people come in and say, "This is the best seat in the market. This is what I want," and then I say, "Okay, well, let's just send in a few," and they end up finding something else. So if you have a local dealer, um, it's definitely worthwhile to go get in some kayaks and do some demos. But otherwise, it's just leaning on Hooked, the forum, or calling in and talking to us, and we'll try to help you through it because we've seen a lot. But I would say try not to get your mind made up off of what you find just on the internet, especially if you're new. If you've been in the game a while and you've been in several bona fides, and you know that a bona fide is what you really like, and you're kind of looking at another bona fide or Old Town or Hobie or whatever it is, that makes a little more sense. But if you're kind of new to the game, I would say just remain open-minded.
Yeah. And obviously, you and I are in a situation where we get to try quite a few, but there's been a handful that I was super excited to try because I thought this is going to be the kayak. I love the way it looks. I love everything about it. And then I've been able to get into it, and you just realize this isn't going to work for where I go fishing in particular, or just work for me. One of the ones that was for me was the Hobie Outback. I love the fin drives. I love how versatile they are, but I've had my knee replacement. So the rotation of my knee, it was just hard for me to stand in that one. And it had nothing to do with the kayak itself. It was just more, for me, it wasn't quite right. So you build that up in your head, and then you
Yeah,
you hop in
and
one.
and especially with some of the new bells and whistles, we get a lot of people who will buy a kayak that's really more kayak than what they really want, but it's just the new shiny thing. And so they buy it, and then you see them on Marketplace or you see them here or there. And we try to help people avoid that. We try to help them really find what suits their skill level and what suits how they're going to use that kayak. We try to really find out those things first, and then point them in some right directions. So, but you're exactly right. People do that all the time. We get people all the time and say, I just had a guy last week, took him out on a demo, and he said, I have sciatica really bad, or a lot of people with back problems. Well, that is so subjective. because everybody's back problems are different if you've got some issues. And so you really got to sit in kayaks and find out which one will work. Sometimes it's seat height that makes all the difference, because your legs are out in front of you, and sometimes it's a swivel seat that's going to make a difference. So yeah, it's just one of those deals where you just really got to get in some, or talk to some guys that have similar issues or similar things that they need to use their kayak. And the forum's a great place for that. I'll keep stressing that the forum's really good, because that is not eco fishing shop folks. There are people on there as well, but that's mainly anglers answering anglers questions, customers of ours or not. It's just people that are like-minded, and you can get a lot of questions answered there.
Yeah, I love that you keep plugging that, because obviously that's kind of like my baby too. And I'm a director and communication specialist, so it's my job to get people hooked up on there, pun intended.
Yeah. Well, and
But
a lot of times it's hard to get
yeah,
in to talk to somebody. It's hard to reach, someone to actually talk to. So you can throw that out there and get 25 people answer your question with 25 different answers, and you can kind of filter through and figure out what suits you. But it's not Facebook, and it's not
yep,
a place where somebody's just going to knock it because this is what you're dealing with and they think you should have this kayak. There's not a lot of that on there, and we make sure there's not, or you make sure there's not, and you do a heck of a job at it.
yeah. So here's how I'll frame it to you. If somebody walks through that door and they've never been in a fishing kayak, and maybe they're an angler, maybe they're coming from a boat, maybe they're been a bank fisher and they just want more access without doing the whole huge purchase of a big old fishing boat. What are the few questions that you ask them right off the bat to try and kind of hone in what would be good for them?
So when they walk in the door and they say they've never done it before, so the first thing I ask them is, what kind of fishing do they do? Are they a river person? Are they a moving water person? Are they a big water person? Do they fish just in their cove, around their dock? I find out kind of what their use is. Then I also want to find out, are you just crappie fishing your dock? Are you, what kind of fishing do you do? Are you ever on the coast? Are you taking it into saltwater at any time? And just figure out kind of where they want to go. And then go from there. Also want to know, do they plan on standing up? Some people don't ever want to stand up. That changes the game a little bit. And I kind of find out which direction they're going to go. And I always use the 80-20 rule. You get a lot of people say, well, I'm going to do both. Well, what are you going to do most?
Yeah.
Because if you're going to spend 80% of your time in the river, 20% of your time in the lake, then we want to gear it towards what you're going to do most, but it's capable of doing both. So that's the start for me every time.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up that, because in my head, when I was asking that question, I was like, well, if he doesn't hit these things, this is what I would say. But those were both it. And shout out to Matt Collins too, one of our field team members. He actually just submitted a blog to me, and I'll have that linked in the bottom of this too. And that was a big focus of his blog. And that's coming from a tournament expert, tournament angler, guy who's been in quite a few. And even his blog was really focused on the water that you will be on versus the water that you'll dream that you'll be on. We all have this like, oh man, it would be epic to take this fishing kayak out on such and such lake or such and such cove or offshore.
Yeah.
But is that a whole trip that you got to plan? And maybe you're going to do that once every 2 to 3 years. Like, what is the water that's closest to you and that you actually have access to? So I love that you brought that up, because I think that's huge.
That, and we even go a little bit deeper with it. And I've learned this over time is, if somebody says river, well, the rivers in Missouri and Arkansas are a lot different than the rivers in Tennessee, Kentucky, places like that. Our rivers tend to be very shallow. You tend to be dragging your kayak a lot. So there are some river guys who can use an autopilot, a Old Town Sportsman autopilot.
Yeah.
You can't do that here. It's just too shallow all the time. So even some of your pedal drives aren't great here. So it's basically finding out where you plan to be, what kind of water it is, what kind of water depth, and what you're doing. And so we get a little deeper with it, but we really try to fine tune where that kayak's going to be, so we can show you some kayaks that are going to perform the best for you.
Yep. Well said. And then I think the other thing too, that at least I see in the forum a lot too, and even the mistakes I've made, we've talked about it a bunch in this podcast, is once again, when you're online looking at these epic YouTube videos and these like TikTok shorts or Instagram reels, And these people got just unlimited amounts of cool accessories, forward facing electronics, and like you get that idea in your head. I don't know how much you steer people that way, or do you tell them to get out on the water first and figure out how they like it, what would be helpful? I mean, I think that's a big thing too.
I tell people all the time I'm the worst accessory salesman in the world because I think you need to take your kayak out in the water and say, a cup holder would be really nice right here. A rod holder would be really good right here. I do want an anchor wizard because this is what I want it for. But I don't think you get it figured out, and especially for new folks. When somebody brand new comes in and they get a kayak and they get a fish finder or possibly forward facing sonar, all that stuff on there, I think you get enamored with the electronics and you don't get used to your boat first. I've had guys in here that I know are very new, very, not the most stable, guys in the world as far as balance and that kind of thing. And I tell them, don't even take a fishing rod the first time. Just get out there and just float your boat and just figure it out. Figure out how your primary and your secondary stability perform. Figure out how it cuts, what kind of turning radiuses you need, so that you're safe in that boat. Always tell people PFD every time, all the time.
100%.
And we try to figure out on accessories, start minimal so that you learn the boat first, especially for new folks. You get a guy who's got a skill level, that he's and he's good. Then you don't worry about it. But the worst thing is when somebody comes in here, buys a bag load of accessories, and then they come back a month later and say, "Hey, will you take this back?" And I don't even need this.
Yep.
And I think you really got to figure that out. Figure your boat out, and then just start adding the things that you need.
Yep. Fish first, add later, I think is the way to go. Or even like you said, I guess maybe fish first isn't even the right way to say it. Like take it out, get a feel for it, then fish, and then figure it out. Cause I mean, I'm one of those people that's guilty of, I got a whole Rubbermaid tote out in the garage full of accessories that just don't fit the style of fishing that I do.
Yeah. And guys do it all the time. Jonathan, he started off with a motor guide on the front of his kayak and that's what everybody was doing. And so that's what he had, and he used it for a few years. And then he realized that he's not using spot lock that much. And some guys use it all the time. But then he went to an NK300 because he needed propulsion. That's what he needed. He needed to get to and from. He also has his pedal drive, so he uses that a lot. He's in the Hobie PA14. And so, he has the advantage of working here. So he got to, make some switches. But even guys that have been doing it a long time kind of figure out that maybe that's not the road, because of your fishing style.
Yeah. I think fishing style and where you fish is the big thing too, because motors are pretty cool. They could get you to and from large spaces, but maybe if you're fishing primarily rivers in Missouri, like you said, and it's skinny, you probably are just going to be dragging it anytime. So a motor almost becomes pointless. So it'd just be extra money. So
yeah,
I think one other thing I would say too is, if you're going to be doing rivers mostly, you might not need a pedal drive. So why waste the money on a kayak that has, I shouldn't say waste money. I mean, but why spend the extra amount of money that a pedal drive would cost you if you're not going to end up using it, or just putting a plate over to cover where the pedal drive goes in.
Yeah. Or we can guide you towards the pedal drives that are built for that. Jackson's pedal drives are built for moving water. They go up into the hull. So if you hit a log, if you run aground, it's just going to raise it up. If you do that with an Old Town or a Bonafide or a Native, you're going to cause damage, or you're going to really have to be pulling that thing up and down all day long. And that's just another thing to drag when you're dragging it. I like the Jacksons because that makes them very multi-purpose, where you can, if you're an 80% river guy and then you want to go to the lake, it's a great boat to do that with because it'll do both. Where if you have an Old Town PDL, it's going to do great in the lake. You're going to struggle in our rivers in Missouri because of the shallows. But and let's segue into motors a little bit why we're talking about that. That's kind of another thing when it comes to motors. I do exactly the same thing. So what do you want a motor for? I tell everyone that a bow mount motor is a fishing tool and a stern mount motor is for propulsion. It gets you where you want to go. If you want spot lock, if you're a crappie guy or you like to sit on beds, or something like that, then then that the bow mount is great. But we've had a big influx of people who are taking their river kayaks and putting a Newport 180, a Torpedo, a Bixby, something on the stern, because they want to run upriver and then float back down to their vehicle. So now they're not having to, yeah, exactly. And it's great.
Yep.
And the ability to get upriver, pull your motor up, and then just float back to your vehicle is very handy. I've got a couple of older fellows here, brothers that have been doing it for a long time. One of the brothers bought a motor, and they got a rope, and he totes him down the river, and then they float back. And so it's very useful for them. And I think on a motor, that's the one thing you really got to decide. What is that motor for? Is that, a lot of times you'll use a stern mount motor in the lake because you want to cover ground, and the propulsion helps with that 100%. Where if that's all you're using it for, well, you don't need a bow mount motor with spot lock and all that. It's actually harder to steer it, harder to do the things you want to do with the bow mount motor. But if you're a spot lock guy, which I love, then the bow mount is something you need to look at.
I like that. Of all the podcasts we've done, that's the first time I've heard you kind of put it that way, that bow mount's more of a fishing tool and the stern mounts are more of a propulsion. I raised my hand during that because, stay tuned. I'm going to be doing some videos here over the next month. I'm going to kind of experiment with the New Canoe Flint and the New Canoe U10 with an NK 180. We're going to see which one I can do a little bit better running up the river. I'm going to kind of put it on both of them and see where it goes, because that's definitely going to be my focus this year. I'm going to be trying to river run, but it's the shuttling when you go on rivers that is the most complex part of it. Do you have a ride when you get float, or can you run yourself upriver? So
yeah, and you could go alone. If you want to run out and fish for the day, you could just shoot upriver a couple of miles and then just float back and you're done. Another thing on motors is budget. Yeah. So a lot more kayaks are coming with the transom capabilities, where we just did a video today on the Crest Craft.
Okay.
And that is a boat that there's two different versions of it. There's the skiff version and the power version. The power version is set up so that you can put an electric NK or a Torpedo or a Bixby or something like that on it. It's got a regular seat, and that's what it's for. The micro skiff version is made to put a tiller handle on. And that tiller handle, you could put a gas, up to 6 horsepower gas on it. Runs, I think, 19 miles an hour. So it'll get with it pretty good. But it's just a different kind of thing. But when I say budget, if you have, like, the new canoes are a great example with the Unlimiteds, the U10, you could put a tiller handle on that for, a couple $100.
Yep, I did that.
Yep. And you can get a really nice Minn Kota, 55-pound thrust motor and throw that on there, hook it to just about any battery you want. And it's very capable of doing what you need it to do with a tiller handle.
Yep.
So budget, you can kind of make that work with just about anything if you need it. And that's some good guidance. You're going to have guys that want to put them on the side of the boat and all that. There's ways to do that. I don't recommend it. They don't steer very good at all when you do that. But but there are things you can do to be budget friendly and still motorize your kayak.
Yep. I'm glad you said that. That's going to be part of I think I'm going to do a whole series of videos. I'm going to do comparisons with that. I have the Minn Kota Endura Max, but I know Newport's got a hand tiller. There's all kinds of hand tiller motors out there. And with new canoes, it's as easy as just throwing on their $30 bracket or whatever it is.
Done.
It's in that range, and you're done, and can hook it up in any battery. But when you start talking about the Newports, and the wiring and like wiring harnesses, through hull stuff, I think I'll probably get Jonathan on here next, because I think I want that to be the next podcast, because then you start talking about battery voltages for some of these higher power ones, like 16 volt, 24 volt, 30 up to 36 volt for some of them.
Yeah.
That's where, like, as a newcomer, and even for me who's been in it for 3 years, but I'm new to this, it just becomes extremely overwhelming, extremely quick. So I'm going to try and do a guide too. So stay tuned. But
yeah, and we can do a quick overview on batteries real quick. Jonathan can go over them a little deeper, but on batteries, that's another thing that when I ask people, okay, what are you gonna do with your motor? Well, if they're just going to shoot upriver and down, and then just float it. I mean, they may be able to go with a 36 amp hour or a 50 amp hour, and that's plenty. And yes, you can buy the lithiums, which we sell a lot of those if you want weight. But if you're really, really budget conscious, you can get just a lead acid battery that'll work. Yep. So, the weight is an issue on those, but it just depends on what you're doing with it. But I will say the one caveat that I always like to tell people is the Amazon or these cheap batteries. If you're getting a 100 amp hour battery, lithium for $299, it's not the same. There's no real governing body on batteries. I always tell people it's like when we were kids and used amplifiers, and you buy a 75 watt, Rockford Fosgate amp, and then you buy a 2500 watt pile, and one's better than the other. Yep. And the wattage doesn't really mean anything. It's the performance of what the product is that matters. And so I would be careful. I would try to get a reputable brand. And there's a bunch of them out there from Amped and Dakota, and there's several really good ones. But I would just do your research and make sure and check reviews and just make sure that battery is going to perform.
Yeah, that's a good review too, because I think I actually have from something else too. I do have one of those 100 amp hour batteries you're talking about. That's not Dakota or Amped, but I also have an Amped one too. So maybe I'll do a comparison of those two. And the hard thing about it is, I think what you're going to know is like the run times might be similar, but it's more longevity, right? Like some of these off-brand ones might not last you near as long. So, but that's just where it gets a little bit overwhelmed, like you said. And use us as a resource, especially you and Jonathan. I'm going to work on getting my knowledge base built up over this summer. That's my goal for that, because I'm jumping into the motor world. But
and use again to plug the forum, but use the forum, because those guys, I mean, we're going to be partial to what we sell here at Eco because it's what we use, not just because we're trying to sell them, but because we use that every day. The guys on the forum, they're going to be using all kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. And I have found that batteries are very regional as well. There are some good regional companies that have great quality batteries, but I had a guy buy, I don't know if it was off Temu or Alibaba or whatever it was.
Right.
But he had a 200 amp hour battery that he bought for $399. Well, I mean, 100 amp hour batteries, $700 or $800. So that is, sometimes things are just too good to be true.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, the forum, I think what's great about that is we have a mix of guys who are just jumping in there for the first time. And then we have also our tournament level field staff in there who have rigged up 2 or 3 fish finders on their kayaks with batteries. They've got switch systems like the Yak Power switching systems, and have done all because once you start jumping into that, it gets a little complex. That's definitely a place where we got people you can lean on.
Yeah, Jonathan's great at that. He can tell you, what kind of battery you're going to need, how many batteries you're going to need. Because if you're motorizing your kayak, you can't use that battery for the rest of the stuff. If your fish finder's on the same battery, you're going to have interference.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Yeah, and we can help with those. That is a question that we get all the time. I've got a, $5,000 in electronics, and my picture's horrible. I can't get it. It's not working. We find out he's got everything wired to one battery.
Yep.
And that's something to where we've made those mistakes, and we can help you avoid them.
Yeah, right, for sure. I mean, I think we could probably even wrap it up too. I wasn't hoping. I kind of thought this would be a shorter one, but there's just so many cans of worms to open up when you start talking about how do you pick the right kayak for yourself as a beginner. I really think, to bring it back to what you said, when you work with people, it's more about trying to match to the water that you're going to be on most of the time. You said the 80-20 rule, 80% of the water you'll be on versus the 20% you think you'll be on. And then, your budget, and not overdoing it right away with all the accessories.
Yeah. And lastly, probably your skill level. If you're a guy who, is not great in a kayak, there's some kayaks that perform amazing, but for a new guy, they're going to feel like they're not stable or they're not doing what they want them to do. Well, they will, but your skill level's got to get up to match that kayak.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm sure, you always want to put people in a kayak that they're going to love. Otherwise, their first experience is going to be the sport, or they're not going to be into it. Obviously, we want people to keep coming back and be everyone's one-stop shop. So we really do try to pair people with what they're going to love and what's going to work best for them.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, we don't sell $300 and $400 kayaks. These are an investment,
Yeah.
and we want you to be happy at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, Travis. If you guys got any questions, drop them down in the comments. I do look at them all the time. And honestly, that's how we get some of the ideas for our podcast. I'd rather be talking about what people want to know versus what I think they want to know. It's always better coming from them. So drop a comment, subscribe. It always helps us. Then reach out if you guys need anything. Thank you.
Absolutely.